In AD 180, Rome, a colossal empire, stretched from the scorching sands of Arabia to the bleak shores of Britain. Never before had the legions guarded such vast dominions, and never before had the eternal city radiated such omnipotence. Yet, at the very moment Rome seemed to soar to the heavens, the seeds of its decline were already germinating from within. On the Danubian frontier, Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the last of the so-called 5 good emperors, passed away. With him departed not merely an individual, but an entire era of stability and prosperity. His son, Lucius Aurelius Commodus, a youthful 19-year-old heir, ascended to the throne. Rome hoped for the succession of a wise ruler, capable of continuing his philosopher father's work. Instead, it received something entirely different, a ruler prone to whims, cruelty, and excessive vanity. Within the imperial palace chambers, someone watched the unfolding events with growing dread. This was Lucilla, Marcus Aurelius's daughter, 11 years older than her brother, who had already tasted power as the wife of the late emperor Lucius Verus. She, more than anyone, could discern the omens foreshadowing change. Behind the facade of the smiling new Caesar beat a restless heart, and Rome was soon to realize this. The tragic saga of Commodus is a narrative of power, corruption, and vengeance, recorded in the annals of history by chroniclers such as Dio Cassius and Herodian. It is a story not only of a ruler whose actions brought the Roman Empire to the brink of catastrophe, but also of a woman forced to resist his tyranny and humiliations from within. This history reveals how profoundly a state can fall when unlimited power falls into the hands of one incapable of wielding it. The demise of Marcus Aurelius in Vindobona, in the harsh lands on the Danubian frontier, was more than just the end of one man's life. It marked the end of an entire era. For almost a century, Rome had been under the wise and prudent rule of Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, sovereigns who have gone down in history as the 5 good emperors. During those times, the Roman Empire flourished, enjoying stability, territorial expansion, and economic growth. Succession was meticulously planned, and personal qualities and merit were prioritized over blood lineage. However, with Commodus's ascent, this tradition was broken. Commodus was the first emperor born and raised within the palace, surrounded by luxury unseen by any of his predecessors. Even as a teenager, his father involved him in state governance, hoping to instill a sense of responsibility and discipline. Instead, the young man developed a fondness for spectacles, gladiatorial contests, hunting, and other entertainments that turned violence into an object of admiration. At 19, Commodus was a tall, athletically built young man, possessing a charisma that drew crowds. To the common people, he appeared energetic and full of vigor, instilling hope that he would end the endless wars and bring long-awaited peace. But those who knew him better saw a capricious prince with an unpredictable nature and cruel tendencies. In the shadow of Marcus Aurelius's grandeur, 2 figures emerged, his children, so unlike one another. Commodus, the young emperor, embodied physical strength and a lust for power. His reign seemed to promise Rome an era of prosperity and triumph, but behind the outward splendor lay immaturity and despotism. Lucilla, by contrast, shone with intelligence and political acumen. As the widow of Emperor Lucius Verus, she held immense influence at court. Many aristocratic women looked to her as a role model. She hoped that with her brother's rise to power, her role in governing the empire would only increase. However, Commodus would not tolerate strong personalities near him, even if it was his own sister. This contrast between brother and sister generated a hidden tension, foreshadowing impending upheavals. While Rome hailed Commodus as a symbol of youth and strength, Lucilla sensed the encroaching danger. Initially, the populace rejoiced at the arrival of the new emperor. Commodus, returning from the German frontier as a triumphator, the son of the renowned philosopher, organized lavish celebrations in Rome. It seemed a new era, free from wars and hardships, was dawning. However, this idyll was short-lived. Commodus gradually lost interest in governing the state, handing the reins of power to inexperienced favorites and surrounding himself with flatterers. He dismissed worthy advisors who had faithfully served Marcus Aurelius. The Senate, accustomed to a certain degree of influence under previous rulers, found itself relegated to the background. The court filled with unscrupulous individuals, ready to do anything to please the young emperor. At the epicenter of these changes was Lucilla, watching her former allies, senators, generals, and officials gradually lose their positions. Her brother not only distrusted her as a political figure, but also began to show signs of an unhealthy attraction. Meaningful glances, attentions exceeding the bounds of brotherly love, and rumors circulating throughout Rome signaled the looming threat of public disgrace. The situation became critical when, during a formal banquet, Commodus allowed himself to hint that his sister should become his consort. These words, uttered in the presence of the highest nobility, were not merely a personal declaration, but a political threat. In Rome, an emperor could impose any, even the most insane desire, and refusal to obey threatened mortal danger. Lucilla, once an empress and her father's advisor, realized the full gravity of the situation. It was not just about her honor. Commodus's obsession was a clear sign of madness gripping the heart of the empire. The palace, once a bastion of philosophical discourse and wise decisions, was transforming into an arena of excess and intrigue. It was in this atmosphere that Lucilla began to hatch a daring plan to defy the emperor, even if that emperor was her own brother. The subsequent months became a period of transformation for Lucilla. From a powerful princess, she transformed into a silent prisoner. Commodus, blinded by his omnipotence, was not content with merely removing her from state politics. He sought her complete subjugation and suppression. The first step was alienation. Members of the Senate, who had previously shared meals and engaged in lively discussions with her, now avoided her company, fearing to incur the emperor's wrath. Generals who had served under Marcus Aurelius no longer dared to greet her in public. Her circle of intimates narrowed to a few slave girls and guards whose loyalty in essence belonged to Commodus. Then followed public humiliations staged like a well-rehearsed play. During official ceremonies, the young emperor began to appear next to her not as a brother, but rather as a consort, his gestures laden with ambiguity, a hand lingering on hers longer than was proper, whispers imbued with possessiveness. These could not go unnoticed. In Rome, where rumors spread faster than legions advanced, people soon began to whisper that Caesar had crossed an unimaginable boundary, committing an act beyond the bounds of what was permissible. At the very heart of Rome, in the Colosseum, A scene unfolded that shocked tens of thousands of spectators. Commodus, in a fit of passionate speech, grabbed Lucilla's hand and loudly declared her his imperial consort. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Even for the seasoned Roman populace, accustomed to the eccentricities of power, this gesture sounded like sacrilege. Lucilla, placed in a humiliating position, was forced to feign a smile and accept her brother's kiss before the entire empire. From that fateful day, her existence was turned upside down. Commodus, under the guise of concern for her safety, moved his sister to his private chambers, effectively turning her into a prisoner. Nights of humiliation and days of contempt followed, steadily eroding the image of a proud empress. However, Lucilla did not break under the weight of circumstances. Behind the facade of submission lay a sharp mind relentlessly working on a plan of retribution. She understood that she could not openly oppose the emperor who controlled the legions and the Praetorian Guard, but she also knew that every tyrant has an Achilles heel. Commodus's weakness was his excessive vanity, his insatiable craving for adoration at games, feasts, and public events. It was this vulnerability that Lucilla decided to turn into a weapon of her revenge. The humiliating public revelation became a turning point in Lucilla's life. The fear that had previously bound her transformed into firm resolve. She realized that the only way to reclaim her lost dignity and rid Rome of her brother's madness was to openly defy him. In an empire where all power was concentrated in the hands of one man, this inevitably meant participating in a conspiracy to overthrow the emperor. Lucilla began to act with extreme caution. Using her loyal slave girls as messengers, she established secret channels of communication with a group of influential senators who expressed discontent, as well as with veterans of Marcus Aurelius's military campaigns, those who still remembered times of discipline and order. Gradually, step by step, she forged an extensive network of allies, united by a shared fear that Commodus's all-consuming corruption and unchecked extravagance would ultimately destroy Rome's great legacy. Among the first to join the conspiracy was Claudius Pompeianus, her husband, whom she had married in a political alliance after the demise of Lucius Verus. Pompeianus was a battle-hardened warrior, an experienced general who had fought alongside Marcus Aurelius in the bloody Marcomannic Wars. Despite his advanced age and aversion to courtly intrigues, he perfectly understood that Rome could not survive under the rule of a young emperor whose interests were confined solely to the amphitheater arena. Joining the conspiracy was Quintus Sosius Falco, a prominent senator trusted by Marcus Aurelius himself. Falco, who had watched with indignation as the new Caesar trampled upon the dignity of his position, was determined to restore the Senate's former influence, even at the cost of his own life. The third important participant in the conspiracy was Ummidius Quadratus, Lucilla's nephew, a young and ambitious scion of one of Rome's oldest families. His vast fortune became the financial cushion that allowed them to bribe guards, hire slaves, and reward key courtiers, all necessary for the success of the undertaking. Away from the watchful eyes of the palace, in secluded country villas, secret meetings were held, where Lucilla would sneak in disguised as a common slave girl to avoid suspicion. The conspirators discussed various plans, from using a gladiator to assassinate Commodus during a spectacular show, to employing poison, a time-tested and discreet instrument of Roman political intrigue. All these people were united not only by a burning hatred for Commodus, but also by a deep conviction that Rome stood on the brink of ruin. And at the heart of this intricate web, combining fury and icy calm, was Lucilla, a woman who dared to challenge the most powerful man in the world. In the corridors of power, a conspiracy was brewing, its aim to put an end to Commodus's reign, whose eccentric antics and despotic tendencies were causing increasing discontent in Roman society. The conspirators, united in a close-knit circle, meticulously weighed all the pros and cons for several weeks, seeking the most reliable and secure method of eliminating the emperor. Initially, a daring idea emerged to use the amphitheater arena for this purpose. It was proposed that a hired gladiator would strike Commodus a fatal blow with a sword during a public contest, cleverly disguising it as a tragic accident. However, this plan carried too many risks and possibilities of exposure. The slightest hint of hesitation or suspicion could instantly alert the emperor, which would lead to inevitable retribution against all conspirators. As an alternative, Lucilla, Commodus's sister, proposed using poison, a time-tested method notorious in Roman political intrigues. The art of poisoning, passed down through generations in deep secrecy, inspired superstitious dread. Lucilla, holding a high position in the imperial family, had unobstructed access to her brother's table. No one would suspect her if she offered Commodus a cup of poisoned wine. To execute this sinister plan, the conspirators turned to experts in lethal substances. Historical chronicles preserve the names of individuals like Locusta, the infamous poisoner from Nero's reign, whose sinister recipes continued to circulate secretly in Roman society. From the many available poisons, the choice fell upon aconitine, a slow-acting substance capable of mimicking the symptoms of a sudden illness. This poison, derived from the aconite plant, also known as wolf's bane, was virtually indistinguishable from ordinary wine. The conspirators proceeded with the meticulously crafted plan. Lucilla was to administer the poison into Commodus's cup during a private feast, when the general revelry and excess would dull vigilance. The poison was intended to take effect only several hours later, when the emperor would have left the feasting hall and retired to his chambers. The calculation was that in such a scenario, no one would suspect a conspiracy, and the emperor's demise would be attributed to the whims of fate or the wrath of the gods. However, the conspirators realized that Commodus's elimination was only part of the task. It was necessary to pre-plan the scenario of subsequent events. Who would occupy the imperial throne? How would the Praetorian Guard react, accustomed to generous gifts from the emperor? After prolonged debates, the choice fell upon Pompeianus, whose noble birth and military achievements were expected to secure him support upon his proclamation as emperor. Lucilla, meanwhile, was assigned the role of an influential figure capable of ensuring stability during the transitional period. The die was cast. On the night of the New Year's feast, the Eternal City was to become an unseen witness to the most audacious assassination attempt on an emperor since the murder of Julius Caesar. The night chosen for the execution of the plot began with a cloudless sky over the Palatine Hill. The torches in the corridors had not yet been extinguished, and the bustling life of the city, its market stalls, noisy taverns, and the gentle flow of the Tiber seemed to pause in anticipation of the coming events. In Commodus's private triclinium, everything spoke of his excessive vanity, luxurious carpets imported from the East, trophies recalling fabricated victories, and exquisite porcelain tableware gleaming in the flickering candlelight. The soft glow of numerous candles diffused through the hall, creating an intimate atmosphere. This was not a boisterous public banquet, but rather a private gathering for selected individuals who asked no unnecessary questions. Lucilla appeared with the grace and confidence of someone aware that one careless word could undo years of meticulous work. Her modest attire, devoid of ostentatious embellishments, seemed to symbolize devotion to her brother. Beneath the folds of her tunic, close to her heart, a small vial of aconitine was hidden, carefully wrapped in cloth. Her hands, trained in the art of etiquette and deception, remained unperturbed. The invited guests took their allotted places, anticipating the evening. Commodus entered with pomp, clad in his favorite persona, a blend of ancient hero and gladiator. His presence instantly filled the entire space. His laughter, which usually sent a chill down others' spines, sounded particularly provocative that evening. He greeted each guest with kisses and friendly slaps on the back, displaying unshakable confidence in his untouchability. He then reclined comfortably on his couch and gestured for Lucilla to bring him his favorite Falernian wine. The feast proceeded in its usual course, adhering to established order. Music, recitations, and a variety of exquisite dishes, blending luxury and exoticism, created an atmosphere of hedonism. Slaves moved silently among the guests, carrying platters of delicacies, while wine pourers filled golden goblets with sparkling wine. Loud laughter drowned out any hint of discomfort or doubt. In this setting, the crucial step of the conspiracy seemed insignificant, almost imperceptible. Lucilla approached the emperor, pitcher and goblet in hand. With dignity, she filled the goblet with wine, bowed slightly, and offered it to Commodus. His gaze lingered on his sister for a moment. An outsider might have mistaken this for a display of brotherly affection. No one noticed the transparent substance being added to the wine. No one felt the cool touch of the small vial whose contents dissolved imperceptibly into the drink. The initial hours after the toast became a true test of mental fortitude. Commodus, reveling in the moment, continued to drink and casually recount tales of his military triumphs. Lucilla, careful not to betray her true feelings, offered a strained smile, savoring the unfolding spectacle while simultaneously reining in the storm of emotions within. The conspirators, lost among the guests with impassive faces, exchanged barely perceptible glances filled with anticipation and simultaneously dread of potential failure, which could mean the complete collapse of their scheme. The aconitine they had chosen did not grant an instant and painless demise. Its main virtue lay in its ability to act insidiously, masking the true cause of the ailment. Symptoms appeared gradually, and initial signs could easily be dismissed as a common indisposition. After midnight, Commodus began to complain of strange tingling in his hands and feet, followed by slight nausea. A cold sweat broke out on his brow. Physicians, summoned by terrified slaves, arrived with ointments and poultices. However, their efforts proved futile. All this medical fuss more closely resembled a farce intended only to buy a little time. Lucilla watched every change in her brother's condition without blinking, as if it were a long-awaited lesson, endured by her through years of humiliation. In her soul, feigned compassion wrestled with an insatiable thirst for justice. An atmosphere of tense anticipation settled in the imperial chambers as Commodus, feeling the encroaching weakness, frantically clutched at a table, begging for a sip of water. The faces of some courtiers paled, a priest hastily whispered prayers, a centurion grumbled softly, and physicians intently checked his pulse. The scene, initially confined to the hall's walls, rapidly spread throughout the palace in the form of alarming rumors. By 2 a.m, the gravity of the situation became clear to all. The aconitine began its merciless work. Commodus's voice broke. His breathing became heavy and raspy. He tried to rise but collapsed, enfeebled. Slaves rushed to his aid, surrounding him with care. Lucilla remained close, supporting him and feigning sisterly devotion. Yet deep down, she realized this moment was a watershed, separating vengeance from inevitable doom. The plan had worked flawlessly, but the slow agony she witnessed left a profound moral scar that even death could not erase. At 3:30 a.m., paralysis seized Commodus's respiratory muscles. He fought desperately for each breath, clutching his cloak convulsively. Agonized cries tore from his throat, reflecting the realization of the betrayal unfolding before his very eyes. With sudden clarity, he looked at Lucilla, searching for a flicker of mercy in the eyes of the woman who was his sister. She, concealing her true feelings behind a mask of grief, bowed her head and uttered words of comfort she herself did not believe. Commodus's final moments unfolded into a tragic spectacle, rife with horror and despair. Overwhelmed by helplessness, he appealed to the gods and the memory of his parents, hoping to regain a fading sense of security. His chambers filled with feigned lamentations and chaotic commands, while physicians, in a flurry of futility, uttered useless incantations. At dawn, the emperor drew his last breath. A mask solidified on his face, in which a discerning observer could detect the imprint of fear and belated remorse. His death immediately elicited a reaction, a blend of relief and apprehension. The conspirators hypocritically feigned sorrow and astonishment. Lucilla remained silent beside her brother's body, her face a flawless mask of mourning. News of the emperor's demise swiftly spread through the palace and the city, sparking rumors of a sudden death. The Praetorian Guard and senators nervously sensed the precariousness of power. That night, Rome indulged neither in celebration nor in mourning. It paused, anticipating profound uncertainty. Questions immediately arose, like a flock of ravens: accident, illness, or murder. Physicians engaged in fierce debates about the cause of death. Some, trembling with fear, whispered of strange symptoms, hinting at poisoning. The theory of poisoning could not be dismissed, and while Lucilla and her supporters sought to portray the emperor's death as the will of the gods or a twist of fate, history was already beginning to weave its own narrative. The feast had ended. The fatal blow was struck by a hand guided by precise calculation and enduring patience. Yet the hand that held the vial of poison could not foresee the entire chain of tragic consequences: the conspirators' ambitions, the Praetorians' wrath, the Senate's wavering, and the shadow of chaos ready to engulf the empire. Commodus's blood was spilled in the palace, and its echo would resonate for years in subsequent power struggles. The demise of Emperor Commodus at the dawn of the first day of 193 AD did not bring the long-awaited peace that Lucilla and her supporters had naively anticipated. On the contrary, this event suddenly tore open a gaping chasm at the very heart of the Roman Empire. The Senate, hastily convened for an emergency session, found itself facing an extremely complex dilemma. Rome was left without a sole ruler, and the conspirators needed to fill the resulting vacuum of supreme power as quickly as possible. The initial proposal seemed straightforward. Claudius Pompeianus, a distinguished general and Lucilla's husband, was to ascend to the imperial throne. He possessed an undeniable birthright to power and formidable military experience, both essential for stabilizing the tottering empire. However, Pompeianus, keenly aware of the inherent dangers of assuming the reins of power under the watchful and suspicious gaze of the Praetorians, prudently declined such an enticing offer. Advanced age, the intricate web of political intrigues, and his inherent caution compelled him to retreat into the shadows. In the ensuing political vacuum, another contender for the throne unexpectedly emerged. Pertinax, a respected senator, an elderly man seasoned by experience who had earned a reputation as a stern and incorruptible moralist. The Senate almost unanimously proclaimed him emperor, naively believing that his high moral authority could appease the agitated populace. However, Pertinax inherited a throne poisoned by intrigue. The Praetorian Guard, accustomed to generous gifts and unbridled entertainments during Commodus's reign, harbored not the slightest trust in the new Caesar and felt slighted by the making of such a crucial state decision. An ominous silence descended upon the imperial palace, broken only by the hushed whispers of the conspirators who now grasped the irreversibility of their deed. Commodus's death, like a sinister shadow, enveloped Rome, plunging it into a state of uncertainty and anxious anticipation. In the streets of the Eternal City, news of the emperor's passing evoked a mixed reaction. For some, the ruler's sudden demise resonated as divine retribution. Others sadly recalled the lavish spectacles and generous games arranged by Commodus. The city, as if split into two camps, plunged into an atmosphere of silent discord and ominous rumors. Lucilla, the instigator and secret driving force behind the conspiracy, soon realized that her triumph was illusory and short-lived. Pertinax, mindful of the support extended to him by certain senators, had no intention of sharing political power with her. Furthermore, he well understood that Lucilla, owing to her proximity to the deceased Commodus and her imperial lineage, posed a serious threat. The Senate, which had previously treated her indulgently as a widowed princess, now preferred to keep her in the shadows, barring her from state governance. The conspirators, like frightened rats, began to scatter in all directions. Some, hiding in their homes, tried to blend into the crowd, while others, conversely, sought to win the favor of the new emperor at any cost. Meanwhile, the Praetorian Guard, whose loyalty was as fickle as the sea wind, transformed into an unpredictable and dangerous element. The soldiers stationed in the capital itself were prepared to sell their allegiance to whoever offered them the highest price. Commodus's downfall did not signal the end of an era of tyranny, but merely heralded forthcoming upheavals. Rome, instead of the longed-for peace, faced a new wave of instability, and for Lucilla, this meant plunging into an abyss of unresolved issues. Although Commodus's death was met with jubilation among senators and courtiers weary of his despotism, for Lucilla it did not bring the desired liberation. She soon realized that her involvement in the conspiracy had not gone unnoticed. On the contrary, the shadow of suspicion hung over her with renewed intensity. Initially, Lucilla remained silent. She attended the official funeral ceremony with an impassive expression, displaying the dignity of a Roman princess. Yet, deep down, she was tormented by memories of that fateful night, Commodus's death throes, his desperate pleas, the poison slowly ravaging his body. These images haunted her dreams like an unceasing echo. Revenge had been exacted, but its price proved exorbitant, an unhealing wound in her soul. Soon, rumors began to circulate. Some of the imperial physicians hinted that Commodus's symptoms did not align with a natural illness. Other slaves, who had served at the feast, secretly spoke of strange wine and Lucilla's suspicious gestures. And though there was no direct evidence, these whispers, like an unseen poison, infiltrated the corridors of power, tainting the atmosphere around her. Those in power meticulously monitored Lucilla's every move. Emperor Pertinax, keen to solidify his legitimacy and establish stability in the empire, could not afford to disregard the rumors and speculations circulating in society. For him, Lucilla was an exceptionally awkward figure, the sister of the deceased emperor, a Caesar's widow, and a key participant in palace intrigues. Her very presence constantly reminded of the possibility of Rome reverting to times of family conspiracies and power struggles. Consequently, Pertinax decided on her isolation. Lucilla was forbidden from exerting any influence on Senate decisions or participating in state ceremonies as she had done before. Her social circle began to shrink rapidly. Many senators started to avoid her, fearing to incur suspicion for associating with the disgraced aristocrat. Lucilla, who had spent her entire life surrounded by power and luxury, experienced the full weight of solitude for the first time. Residing in her villas, far from political centers, she reflected on the events that had transpired. She had destroyed the man who had humiliated and insulted her, but in doing so, she also destroyed her own standing in imperial Rome. Her name became associated with suspicion and intrigue. Her prestige and influence waned, and her future was overshadowed by pervasive distrust from which she could not escape. Revenge brought her only a semblance of justice, yet simultaneously condemned her to moral exile. The price of vengeance was solitude, which proved far more cruel and tormenting than the imprisonment her own brother had once inflicted upon her. Commodus's demise did not bring the Roman Empire the longed-for peace, but merely unleashed chaos and widespread instability. Rome, a city hardened by the vicissitudes of power, suddenly found itself in an ominous void. Pertinax, hastily elevated to the throne by the Senate, desperately attempted to restore discipline and order, which had been trampled by the previous emperor's excesses. However, his reign was doomed to fail from the outset. Ominous rumors about the true circumstances of Commodus's death not only failed to subside, but proliferated, like embers smoldering in taverns, market squares, and the corridors of the Senate. Whispers spoke of a diabolical feast, poisoned wine, and a woman's hand that had exacted retribution, an act no man had dared to commit. Many covertly pointed to Lucilla, though only a few dared to speak of it openly. The Praetorian Guard, lavishly showered with Commodus's favors during his lifetime, viewed the newly appointed emperor with undisguised suspicion. In their eyes, Pertinax was an illegitimate ruler and a cantankerous old man who failed to grasp their venal aspirations. Discontent grew, and the ominous echo of impending rebellion intertwined with whispers of unexposed conspiracies. Meanwhile, Lucilla watched in horror as her meticulously crafted plan transformed into an uncontrollable monster. She had naively believed that Commodus's death would open the doors to a new political order, perhaps led by Pompeianus, and that she herself would become an influential figure, weaving intrigues from the shadows. But the harsh reality proved entirely different. The ambitious designs of many clashed with Pertinax's helplessness and the insatiable greed of the Praetorians. A mere few months later, the tyrant's assassination became merely the spark that ignited an all-consuming conflagration threatening to destroy Rome. Commodus's demise plunged Rome into a maelstrom of turmoil and upheaval. The Senate, torn by internal strife and power struggles, proved incapable of establishing effective governance. The provinces, yearning for stability and prosperity, began to lose faith in the new emperor's legitimacy and strength. The Roman populace, weary of endless intrigues and elite infighting, began to long for a strong hand, even if that hand belonged to a tyrant prepared to take harsh measures to maintain order. The Antonine dynasty, which had bestowed upon the world a constellation of distinguished rulers, such as Marcus Aurelius, fell with Commodus's passing. Legitimate heirs to the throne were absent, and the empire was engulfed by a wave of chaos, political assassinations, and usurpations that shook the very foundations of the state. The blood spilled at Commodus's last feast not only failed to heal wounds, but opened a gaping fissure that seemed destined never to close. Following Commodus's tragic demise, Lucilla briefly felt hope for liberation from her brother's oppressive shadow. However, fate had prepared for her a life filled with suspicion, solitude, and the contempt of those who had once revered her as the exemplary daughter of Marcus Aurelius. The new emperor, Pertinax, despite his gratitude for being rid of the detested tyrant, did not trust Lucilla. He recognized that her influence remained considerable, and her cunning and intellect could make her the nexus of a new conspiracy. Fearing her ambitions, Pertinax placed her under close surveillance, restricted her freedom of movement, and narrowed her circle of confidants. Lucilla spent her final years far from the splendor and bustle of the imperial court. The opulent palace halls, once the stage for her power and grandeur, faded into dim memories of the past. Lucilla's fate after the fateful attempt on her brother, Emperor Commodus, is shrouded in a veil of contradictions and conjectures. Some chroniclers assert that she was sent into exile to a remote villa, steeped in luxury, but deprived of the essential freedom. Others recount that she was tolerated at the imperial court, yet she always remained under a burden of suspicion that was never dispelled. The truth is that her name is forever etched into the annals of history. For some, she is a heroine, possessing an unyielding will and courage to halt a monster in the guise of an emperor who threatened to plunge Rome into an abyss of chaos. For others, she is a cold-blooded sororicide who betrayed the blood ties of the Antonine dynasty and hastened the twilight of an era that still embodied the empire's grandeur. Lucilla passed away in 189 AD at the age of 54, leaving behind neither impassioned speeches nor personal memoirs. Only echoes of her act remained, dividing Rome into two camps. Some revered her courage, while others condemned her deed. Her image became a unique warning about the immense power wielded by women operating from the shadows, capable of altering the course of history in a world ruled by men. Poets mentioned her name in whispers, historians recorded her story with extreme caution, and succeeding centuries transformed her into an ambiguous symbol, avenger or betrayer, savior of Rome or executioner of her own family. Lucilla's story, lost in the labyrinth of time, undeniably testifies to her life and tragic demise at the very heart of imperial Rome's intrigues. Her name, though touched by the patina of oblivion, serves as a stark reminder that in opulent palaces, power was asserted not only by force of arms, but also by the treachery of poison, ominous silence, and an insatiable thirst for revenge. The drama of Lucilla and Commodus transcends a mere family feud between a power-obsessed brother and sister. It represents an ominous harbinger of Rome's decline, a mighty empire, and serves as an eternal warning of how the moral decay of one ruler can lead to the downfall of an entire state. Commodus, known for his gladiatorial eccentricities and a reign founded on fear and sycophancy, entered the annals of history as a tyrant who debased the sacred image of an emperor into a pathetic spectacle. His demise did not bring the longed-for stability, but became the starting point for a whole series of crises: the reigns of short-lived emperors, bloody civil wars, and the relentless erosion of the institutions that upheld Rome's grandeur. Lucilla, in turn, embodies a contradictory image of a Roman woman vested with power. Possessing neither an army nor legitimate rights to the imperial throne, she employed other weapons bestowed upon her by politics and high status: a sharp mind, the ability to influence from the shadows, and ultimately lethal poison. Her deed became an act of personal emancipation and a pivotal moment in history. By eliminating Commodus, she triggered an era of chaos that hastened the disintegration of an already vulnerable imperial system. Historians such as Cassius Dio and Herodian unanimously assert that the decline of the Antonine dynasty, which had granted Rome nearly a century of peace and prosperity, marked the end of the so-called Golden Age. Thereafter, the empire increasingly relied on military might, became more susceptible to internal corruption, and lost faith in its own institutions. Today, Lucilla's image oscillates between heroine and betrayer. Her story serves as a reminder that vengeance, even when seemingly justified, rarely brings satisfaction, and that unchecked and absolute power corrupts not only the ruler, but also their entourage, who suffer from their actions. The legacy of Lucilla and Commodus endures as a cautionary tale, a tale that human passions, desires, ambitions, fear, and hatred can shape the course of history with the same force as armies or laws. Rome did not fall overnight, nor by the hand of a single enemy. Its destruction began from within, in poisoned feasts, in the emperor's whims, in the silent tears of a sister turned executioner.